1.3 Developments in South and Southeast Asia. So first, for clarity, South Asia is basically India, and Southeast Asia is like the area and islands around like Indonesia. Other things to keep in mind: Hinduism, major widespread religion in this area, as well as Islam, as well as Buddhism. Okay, so at this time, like North India and South India are pretty separate. And here, because we're talking political structures first, politically, although Hinduism did give like a cultural unity in some ways. Anyway, let's start with South India. This tended to be more stable than Northern India. So down there was this like Chola dynasty, but we're kind of focused more on when it was replaced by the Vijayanagara Empire. So I know I'm really bad at pronouncing things, and that's also like long, so if I run into it again, I'm gonna just call it V, or I'm gonna have Google say it. Anyway, this empire was started by two brothers who left the Delhi Sultanate and established this Hindu kingdom. Next, Northern India. So there was a lot more changes there, and we start with the Rajput kingdoms. This was like a group of Hindu kingdoms, and they often fought. And because it was so competitive, there didn't end up being any sort of centralized government down there. And this left them very vulnerable to attacking Islamic armies. And so both Islam and Islamic forces spread downward into northern India. Then they conquered the city of Delhi and created the Delhi Sultanate. And so this interaction of Islam and Hinduism becomes very important because it's an Islamic government and it is a mostly Hindu people that they're ruling over. So some converted and others resented. A reason for the resentment could possibly be the jizya. That was like a tax on people in the empire who weren't Muslim. It's a good piece of evidence for any sort of LEQ, DBQ, etc. Delhi Sultanate never really had a bureaucracy, and so they still kind of had the local kingdoms playing a role in like politics and the economy stuff. And then they were like, let's move southward, but they were like, oh no, the Mongols are coming, and that was a different thing. Now let's get a little more into religion in South Asia because it's a very important part of understanding really all the other aspects of it. So, before Islam, most people in India were Hindu, and there were a few who were Buddhist. Some differences between Hinduism and Islam. Hinduism is a polytheistic religion, whereas Islam is a monotheistic religion. The deities of Hinduism are painted, sculpted, etc., but in Islam, there aren't supposed to be any visual representations. Hinduism also enforced a caste system, whereas Islam was more for equality for all believers. Then Hinduism has multiple texts that like people recognize as sacred, whereas in Islam there's only the Quran. So, the arrival of Islam. Initially entered rather forcefully, wanting to proselytize or actively seek converts, as the book puts it. It's a bolded word, you might want to know the definition. However, forcing people to convert was not the most successful. So most converts ended up being voluntary. And because, like I was talking about earlier, Islam is more for like equality of all believers, many low-caste Hindus were attracted by that and the thought of being able to perhaps move their status up because they would then be equal if they converted. The most to convert to Islam actually, though, were Buddhists. So Buddhism actually became a more minority religion where it started. So the caste system is one of the strongest continuities, and it gave this stability even though it was a decentralized place. And it was flexible and able to adjust to new people. So like Muslim merchants found their place in the hierarchy based on their occupation. Those converts that wanted to escape a low caste, oftentimes it didn't really quite work out for them though, just because of the way it was like so ingrained into society, and they didn't have that like education and opportunity to like get out of their low status. The application of like Islam's core teachings varied, and converts accommodated to it, but they didn't totally like reject tradition either. So moving on to cultural interactions, both South Asia and the Middle East showed intellect and cultural achievements. For example, Arab astronomers and mathematicians expanded on Indian knowledge, and Indian progress in algebra and geometry was then translated into Arabic. Sultans built things with like Hindu art and Islamic architecture. For example, the Qutb Minar, which was a mosque built on a Hindu temple. the language Urdu developed, which was a mix of Hindu grammar and Arabic vocab, as well as it had elements of like Farsi. Now, the Bhakti movement. This focuses on an attachment to like a specific deity and didn't discriminate to women or those of lower status. This started in southern India. And Bhaktis were Hindus, but they were kind of similar to the Sufi Muslims because they both kind of had like an emphasis on personal reflection and self-reflection. And it helped spread Hinduism in a similar way that the Sufis did Islam. Now, Southeast Asia. So like today's country in that area is Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and like Vietnam. There was lots of Hinduism and Buddhism and valuable trade around there, and they focused mostly on like gold, silver, metals, and spices as like trade things. When I was taught this, we referred to them as the Spice Islands often. Sea-based kingdoms. The Srivijaya Empire was a Buddhist kingdom, big navy. They were based in Sumatra and would like charge fees for ships, and they controlled the Strait of Malacca. And then the Majapahit kingdom, this was based on Java, and at its height had 98 tributaries. It was a Hindu kingdom, though it had strong Buddhist influences and it controlled sea routes. Now some land-based kingdoms. The Sinhala dynasties was in Sri Lanka, early immigrants from India and center of Buddhist study. And Buddhist priests would serve as like advisors to monarchs because it was that ingrained in Buddhism. They had a really cool like irrigation system which helped with economic growth. And then the Khmer Empire, this was by the Mekong River. They had a good drainage system and irrigation system which helped them with economics. So they were harvesting lots of crops and they wouldn't get super flooded. Their capital was Angkor Thom, and there was a lot of Hindu artwork, but then eventually, as like the leader shifted to eventually being Buddhist, more Buddhist artwork and like stuff came about, and so they both existed, and it was kind of cool because none of it was like destroyed, and so, well, I don't know if it's not destroyed today, but they both exist at the same point because the Buddhist sculptures were added to the temples without destroying the Hindu artwork, is what the book says. But then the Sukhothai kingdom invaded and forced them out. Oh wait, so the ruins do still stand. Islam spread throughout all of this, just because, trade merchants and stuff, Indian Ocean. Sufis also helped with that. And that is it for that chapter. I hope this helped. I have other videos just like this. If you want to go look at them, you should. Thank you for watching.